2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is one back. Walk the ball.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Anthony Witrado, here to break down what looked like it was going to be a good game, and then it looked like it was going to be a crappy game. Anthony, ended up being a good game. I joked the Dodgers fed the optimists like me tonight on a day when they needed to. They beat the Cardinals 7-6, coming from behind in this one, and there's actually... surprisingly, Anthony, a lot of positives, I think, to take away from this one.
There are positives to take away from this one. I'm not too happy tonight.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into it. We got lots of news to cover. Obviously, some huge injury news from the Dodgers that came out minutes before this game was scheduled to start. The Dodgers released their lineup, I believe, 3 minutes before first pitch was scheduled to happen. Part of that was because of a massive injury update that we got on Tyler Glasnow that we didn't get, then we still didn't get, and then we got. The Dodgers then play this game with Justin Wrobleski. Oh, Anthony's face just disappeared. Didn't like the cup. Wrobleski comes up, doesn't pitch that great. The bullpen feels like it's going to try to blow this, but here's why I'm encouraged, Anthony. And we've got a few questions we'll get to, all that kind of thing. But here's why I'm encouraged. They get terrible Glasnow news right before the game. They go up 2-0, immediately give it away in the bottom, give up a run in the third, give up a run in the fifth. They're down 4-2. And with 2 outs, this team fights and claws back. They try to give it immediately back again. They go up 7-4, and then it's all of a sudden 7-6, and they hang on to win it. I think Michael Kopech, who's going to be a talking point, is an encouraging thing. So that's a positive to me. On a night when seemingly everything was going wrong, this team came from behind, gutted it out behind a pretty poor pitching performance, and the offense. I just tweeted this. 5 through 9 in the order tonight, Anthony. 8 hits for the Dodgers, 6 runs and 6 RBIs. Those are the positives, the things they fed the optimist in me.
Yeah, for sure. Lux kept it going. Mookie kept it going. Bottom of the order was good. Kopech is a bright spot right now.
Yeah.
He's pitched himself into partly because of what he's done and partly because of the options. One of the most trusted arms in that bullpen at this point. So good things coming out of this aside from the win. On the pitching side for me, this is now it's a problem.
Yeah.
And it's a problem that is, I think, encompassing of how the pitching staff has been managed. The fact that this is injuries aside, understanding all of that, but ineffectiveness and short leashes that could have helped a bullpen that is taxed, and now a bullpen that on any given night is mediocre to poor if the wrong arms are in there at the wrong time. So they should have swept that series in Milwaukee. It was a 4-game series. They should have won all 4. They gave away those last 2 games, a combination of defense and not being able to prevent runs out of the bullpen. And then, I mentioned managing, the Flaherty only pitching 5 thing was just okay. Like if you're really trying to, because what doesn't make sense to me is they take measures to try to save the bullpen arms, but then they do stuff like that that sort of contradicts the philosophy or the strategy there.
Yeah.
And then you're leaning on them hard for 4, 5, 6 games in a row, 5 games out of 7, that kind of, those kinds of runs. And they flashed the record up there when leading after 7. It's one of the worst in baseball since whatever the date was in July now. There's a reason for that. And tonight, them trying to give that lead back a couple of times, aside from the Glasnow news as well, it's just I was very happy and optimistic coming into this Tuesday show that we did together.
Yeah,
which was a win. A few days later, coming off of another win, I feel very deflated in terms of like what the outlook is right now.
Yeah, and I think the Dodgers are kind of, they're in a funky spot because, to your point, I think they say one thing with their mouth, and it's almost like, I shouldn't even say with their mouth. It's almost like they're outside of game decision making feels like, hey, we need to manage the bullpen. We need to make some key decisions to rest some guys. But then it's like once they get into a game, Dave can't help himself because to some point, like they need to win these games, like they need to manage the games as if they're important. And yet at the same time, because they have to manage so many of these close games with pitchers who can't give them any length, that it goes back and forth, right? Like Flaherty wasn't awesome last night. And so it would have been great if he could have given you 6 or 7 innings. But at the same time, Dave's looking and saying, but we also need to remain competitive in this game and give ourselves a chance. And so I
thought Flaherty, aside from that first inning, was fairly low stress the rest of the way. He worked out of a jam or two there, but it didn't seem like he was super stressed in terms of like those 90, 93 pitches, whatever it was, were super taxing on him at that point. And you're pitching, or I'm sorry, you're playing to try to save the bullpen as much as you can. And a veteran guy that you're going to lean on going down the stretch here, and you take him out after 5, I feel gaslit, I think, by like you said, the things that they tell us before or after a game, and then the way the game is actually managed. And I understand managing for wins, but they're like yesterday I had the question of like, was leaving Flaherty out there to try to get out of that inning with 15 another 15 pitches. Was he not trustworthy enough to go to a bullpen that had already been leaned on? And, I thought that he was pitching fine, and not to just take this back to yesterday, I want to look at this game as well, but, what you got coming. And trying to manage ahead is also part of this thing too. And it just feels like Dave, or I don't know. It just feels contradictory. And considering where they're at health wise, it just again with the Glasnow news, it just doesn't give me a lot of optimism that they can find their way through based on the combination of all of those things that we're talking about.
But I mean, and just not to belabor the Flaherty point, but in that 5th inning, which was his last inning, he gets a ground out, a strikeout, a 5-pitch walk to Ortiz, and then he gives up a single on the 7th pitch of the at bat to Terang, who then steals second. So he gets out of that 5th in a 3-3 game with runners at 2nd and 3rd, and he gets you out of it. So I think my point is just in a 3-3 game, if he comes back out for the 6th and gives up a run or 2 runs, Dave gets absolutely slaughtered for saying, hey, do you not see what just happened in the 5th inning? And again, these are the damned if you do, damned if you don't situations that I think the Dodgers place themselves in. And ultimately, it's a damned if you do situation because Daniel Hudson, who had actually been fairly reliable, one of the few bullpen arms over the last, 2 weeks that I think had been semi-trustworthy. And then he gets absolutely shelled. So I'm not trying to be a Dave Roberts apologist. And again, like my track record on this show, if you've watched for more than the last 3 months, would tell you that I'm not a Dave Roberts apologist. But I just think sometimes he's put into these situations where he gets in trouble for pulling guys too early. He gets in trouble for pulling guys too late. He gets in trouble for going to the bullpen too often. Like, I just think it's, and I'm not saying you're flip-flopping on this. I just think he put into situations where it's 51-49 right and wrong.
There has to be, though, somebody in the rotation that you trust as much as you trust that, let's say, Hudson, because the more you tap into that well on a consistent basis where guys aren't getting the rest. And here's the other thing. Nobody in this rotation is pitching on 4 days rest.
Right.
They're all getting more. So if you can't stretch guys every now and then to try to save the bullpen an inning, then what are we doing this for? You know what I mean?
It's for the long game. It's for
guys
October.
are getting hurt anyway. I mean, it's just and he can't predict that. I'm not saying that he can predict that stuff, but like the damned if you do, damned if you don't thing becomes damned always if your bullpen is tired. And if you go into the postseason with guys who are used to only throwing between 85 and 95 pitches and only going 5 innings, like for the most part, max, like this bullpen's covering almost 4 innings a game right now. Then you put yourself in a situation where that bullpen is gassed, not reliable enough, and you need them to be great in October, and they're not going to be.
Yeah. Here's one other note on Flaherty. So you mentioned the start, if you went back one start before against the Pittsburgh Pirates, almost identical situation, really fascinating because he comes out in the fifth. He ends up giving a 3-run homer up in the fifth inning. Dodgers are up 7-1. Flaherty pitches the fifth, gives up a 3-run home run, 7-4. He comes back in the sixth inning. He ends up throwing 110 pitches in this game. So I'm imagining he's probably right around 93 when they put him back in the sixth. Walk, fly out, strikeout, single. He ends up getting pulled from that. And so, again, this was a situation where by the time he took the ball in the sixth, it was 9-4. But Dave throws him back out there with around the same pitch total, and he ends up putting 2 guys on. Bonda has to come in and bail him out of that. So, again, I think these are just the data points that are in the back of Dave's mind where, to your point, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like, I understand the argument for, hey, the lesser of all evils maybe is just throw Jack Flaherty out there again. He's gotten an extra day of rest. He's one of 2 workhorses who at the time you had healthy. Your bullpen needs help. Like, throw him back out there. I just play devil's advocate to say, like, Dave kind of did try that 5 days before, and he had to pull him with runners at second and third. And this time it was a tie game.
Yeah, and that's fair to bring it up. But if you base every decision on, well, this is what happened last time, and that sample size is 1 game last time, then what are we doing here? Because remember, we were coming off of short starts from Kershaw and Buehler as well. And again, like, this bullpen is picking up almost 4 innings a game right now.
Yeah, at least.
That's not sustainable.
No.
That's not sustainable to the point where, like, you can then lean on those guys for an October run.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Let's get to a couple of these super chats here. As always, we appreciate the folks joining us live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Richard says, great win, but I have more faith in death and taxes than I do in Grove and Bobby Miller. Seen better arms on a chair. Can't afford to have them struggle. Grove wasn't good tonight. Everybody knows I like Michael Grove. He got squeezed on the first one, 3-2 pitch, clearly strike 3, gets called ball 4. A guy comes around to score. But I mean, the bullpen as a whole tonight, Anthony, the sweat, I'll say the bullpen as a whole, 4 walks from the bullpen tonight in 4 innings. You just can't do that. The free passes that they gave up were unacceptable. 2 of those were from Grove. 2 of those came around to score. And again, even if you take the first one off and say, give me a strikeout there, he walks the next guy and he ends up coming around to score as well. So, Bobby Miller, who we're going to get into, slated to start tomorrow night. So, you should have more faith in death and taxes than anything, Richard, but I understand the sentiment here with Grove and Bobby Miller.
Yeah, understandable. We still have to see it on a more consistent basis from both of those guys. And Bobby Miller he looks like he's wearing the Riddler outfit right now because he's just a bunch of question marks with him. Like, we don't really know what to expect with that guy right now. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah. Larry, I like this. Just positive vibes only. Which scenario would be more memorable to clinch the World Series? Kershaw closing out the 9th in a blowout, or Ohtani hitting a walk-off? This one's easy for me, Anthony, but I'll let you answer.
In a 1-run game, Kershaw closing it out.
You don't even want the blowout. He gave you a blowout here of Kershaw going in.
No, because then it doesn't matter to me. That needs to be a position where, like,
I might not be awake to see it if Kershaw gets put into a relief role in a 1-run game, Anthony. I'll be unconscious, hand over heart, with sirens wailing in the distance. I think
if the other option aside from Ohtani is Kershaw in the 9th in a blowout, then I'll take the Ohtani walk-off.
Yeah, it's got to be Kershaw for me. I mean, I cried watching the guy run out of the bullpen when they won the last World Series. You tell me he's going to be on the mound and I'm going to be an absolute wreck. So I love that question. Fun to think about. Hopefully we get there. We're going to talk Ohtani in a little bit, by the way, and it has not been pretty for Shohei Ohtani of late. Let's do a little bit more on this game before we get into some of the storylines that are definitely going to be worth talking about. The Dodgers, you mentioned it, Anthony. They go up 2-0 pretty early on in this one, and it's Gavin Lux again. This guy, like, every time you feel like at some point he has to come back down to earth, Gavin Lux hits a ball to dead center, by the way. Dead freaking center. He goes 2 for 4 tonight with 2 runs and the RBI on that one. Gets the Dodgers off to a nice little lead. Kevin Kiermaier, RBI single. And at that moment, you're like, okay, thank goodness. Like, get Wrobleski a little bit of breathing room. Dodgers need this. Of course, Wrobleski comes back, gives up the home run to Goldschmidt. I got a text. The Goldschmidt home run, Anthony, had an expected batting average of 140. So bad luck, you could say, for Wrobleski. He ends up giving up 3 home runs, so I'm not sure he gets the benefit of the doubt on any of those. Those came in the 3rd and the 5th. 3 home runs allowed, like I said. I saw somebody tweet, like, if not for the home runs, Wrobleski would look good. And I think that was after the first home run. When you get to 3, it's kind of like you can't really say if not for the home runs. I mean, real quick on Wrobleski, 5 innings, 4 hits, 4 earned, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts for him. Throws 79 pitches, 49 of them for strikes. Any sort of takeaways from Wrobleski here, as far as just reactions to what you saw from him?
No, pretty neutral. It was kind of blah. One of those home runs, like you said, was just kind of maybe a little bit of luck, but he gave up 3. So,
all 3 of them weren't luck.
I just, it wasn't anything that was like, it wasn't impressive. It wasn't terrible. It was just sort of blah. Nothing that struck me as like, okay, he's putting himself in a conversation here. It wasn't anything like that for me.
Yeah, those 3 home runs, all over 100 miles an hour. The second 2, 108.8 and 108.7, the 2 hardest hit balls of the night. Wrobleski's an interesting one, Anthony, simply because we did a poll, I believe it was with Matt on Wednesday. Apologies if I'm mixing up my nights here, where we basically said, like, who do you trust the most out of all these other young pitchers? And I was surprised how many people had Wrobleski on that list. The stuff is there. We know the fastball. We know it's the left-hand side, all that. We did an exercise this morning on a short we did where I put up a bunch of mystery players and said, who do you like the most? And basically, aside from Bobby Miller, Wrobleski is pretty dramatically worse than all of the Gavin Stone, Clayton Kershaw, Landon Knack types from in every metric. ERA, expected ERA, strikeouts, walks, all of them are worse for Wrobleski. And so I think, it's easy to talk about the hope of Wrobleski when he's not here. And then when you have to watch him, you're like, yeah, they can't count on this guy right now. I mean, I'm not saying he's as bad as Bobby Miller is, but if we're being honest with ourselves, he's closer to Bobby Miller probably than he is to Gavin Stone and Landon Knack, in my estimation, at least for right now.
Yeah. And then the other part of being honest about this is if their health was somewhat like even just okay.
Yeah.
We don't hear his name.
Nope. Well, we would have heard his name because, yours truly went down to Reno, got a nice little interview with him, but then we might forget
from
his
your
name.
interview in Reno.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, 3 home runs. He kind of, it's one of those where like, he sort of kept you in it. And so you're kind of like, like 5 innings, 4 earned. It's not awesome, but it's also, you kind of shake your head and say, given the circumstances, it's not like the first percentile worst outcome possible. I see some people in the chat, by the way, the Padres did lose, I believe, tonight. That just became official. Shout out to the Colorado Rockies, the Tampa Bay Rays as well. Shout out to them for giving everybody a heart attack and then winning.
I did not think the Padres were going to lose that game. That bases loaded with nobody out in the first inning.
Crazy. So good stuff there. So Wrobleski leaves after giving up the 4 runs. Top of the 6th, though, is where the Dodgers, again, claw back. And guess who's in the middle of it, Anthony? Guess who starts this whole thing off? It's the guy that's been missing for 2.5 months. His name is Mookie Betts, and he hits a home run to get this thing back into striking distance. Gavin Lux, single up the middle off of a glove. Will Smith, infield single. Miguel Rojas, RBI. And then Kevin Kiermaier, 3-run homer for him. We're going to talk Kiermaier a little bit more later, but let's just say on a scale of things you would have expected there, Anthony, an absolute missile from Kiermaier to right center field. Not high on my list. I don't know about you.
No, not the missile. The catch in center, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I like Kiermaier. When we were doing the whole who goes down, who stays thing, he was a stay for me. But not because I thought he was going to start hitting rockets all over the place. That's not why.
Not because of his bat. Not because of his bat. Somebody tweeted at me. They said, Jeff, you talked about how overrated his defense was. You never talked about his bat. And I was like, that's because we all agreed it was terrible. But
it was rated perfectly.
I apologize to Kevin Kiermaier on social media. We'll get to more of that later. So Dodgers take a 7-4 lead. Michael Grove comes in, 3-2 pitch, perfectly placed, called ball 4. That's a walk. Walks the next guy, gets 1 out. Bonda comes in, gives up a pair of singles. All of a sudden, it's 7-6, and you're staring down at the bullpen, and you need 9 outs in a 1-run game, and it ain't looking good. But Anthony, to their credit, Evan Phillips, 1 inning, no hits, no runs. Joe Kelly, 1 inning, no hits, no runs. Michael Kopech, 1 inning, no hits, no runs. 4 strikeouts combined from those 3 guys with just 2 base runners. The Dodgers get the job done, and the bullpen, ultimately, at the end of the day, the bullpen that started to blow this one gets the job done in a game that the Dodgers desperately needed, given that the Padres and Diamondbacks both end up losing.
Yeah. It was a big win for them for that purpose. One thing that I do sort of wonder about now is how much Dave starts to lean on Kopech.
Yeah.
If he feels like he can't trust Hudson, Trinan's out, how does that work out? And
so hold that thought, because I want to get there. We've got a super chat from Laura that's going to take us in another direction, but I promise we're going to have plenty of Michael Kopech talk here in just a minute. Laura with the super chat. Shout out to Kevin Kiermaier. The RBI single in the first, a 3-run home run in the 6th, the great catch in the bottom of the 6th over the top of his head. That ball had an expected batting average over 500. Kiermaier makes a really nice play going back on it and jumping up to catch it. This is a guy, Anthony, that, again, I apologize to. I joked that his defense was overrated. He's played great defense. He's been impactful from that position as well. And, he comes into this game hitting 200. The weighted runs created plus as a Dodger is like 53. It wasn't great. Like, no matter what anybody tells you, it wasn't great. But over the last couple games, he's been good. 2 for 4 tonight with 4 RBIs. And it's kind of the question that I wanted to get to, which I appreciate Laura bringing us up to. Is he officially on the right side of the cut line? You just said it. You had him on the right side of the cut line to begin with. So remind me, we know when Chris Taylor is due back after Muncie and Edman, but Muncie and Edman due back next week, Chris Taylor eventually. And it felt like we were kind of Jason Hayward, Kevin Kiermaier, maybe Chris Taylor, those 3 guys kind of competing for 2 spots. So do you have Hayward as the odd man out? Is it Chris Taylor who's the odd man out? Like Andy Pages, I suppose, could be the odd man out. Who do you have on the outside looking in if Kiermaier, which I imagine, if anything, your position is solidified, it has not changed on Kevin Kiermaier?
No, it hasn't, but I could see him, the last time we talked about it and I had him on the right side of the line was before the last guys came back, right? And so now I'm starting to think he could end up a casualty of the numbers game. Now, if they feel like Pages is, coming back down to earth a bit and Kiermaier stays hot and he continues to produce, outstanding defensive plays, then they may keep him and Pages might be the guy just because, he can be. But I think aside from that, it's probably Kiermaier. I don't think they would do Hayward before Kiermaier. So
sorry. So rewind. So you're saying you actually have Kiermaier on the outside looking in now?
When this next time comes, he might be the casualty, and strictly from a numbers game perspective, unless they decide, you know what, we can afford to do without Pages for a while, he'll go down.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anybody else they would be willing to part with over Kiermaier, even if he might be performing at a higher clip than, like, say, a Jason Hayward.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, a night like tonight tells me. So let me rewind. I want to correct myself. So you've got the 9 guys that are starters for the Dodgers, right? It's a pretty much a standard: Will Smith, Freddie Freeman, Gavin Lux. I'll say Miguel Rojas, Max Muncy, and then you've got Mookie Betts, Tommy Edman, and Teoscar Hernandez. That's kind of your 9. So you've got 4 bench spots to work with. Of those 4, you've got Austin Barnes locked in. Okay, so we've got 3 bench spots left. I feel like Kike Hernandez is locked in. The way they're talking about him, the way they're using him, sort of how he fits. But let's just say for hypotheticals, you've got 5 guys: Andy Pages, Kike Hernandez, Chris Taylor, Kevin Kiermaier, and Jason Hayward. Of those 5, come playoff time, they're only going to have 3 spots. And they can mess with it. Andy Pages could get optioned to sort of spare some time, buy you some time on this one. But eventually it's going to be those 5 competing for 3 spots. And I keep saying this about Kiermaier, Anthony. I think it's between the Dodgers are going to have to figure out who they want in the lineup / the field more. Is it Miguel Rojas or is it Kevin Kiermaier? Because I'm beginning to think between those two, they're going to have to choose one. And I think the safest bet all along has been Rojas because A, he gives you the elite defense at shortstop, which you could probably make a case is a more important spot to have elite defense than center field, although center field is close. And secondly, pretty clearly, Miguel Rojas's bat has been more valuable than Kevin Kiermaier's, even over the last week. He's gotten some big hits, had an RBI single today, had an RBI hit the other day as well. And so my thing all along has been, if Rojas is starting, and Edman's going to be every day as far as I'm concerned in center field, then for a guy like Kiermaier, what's his role? Like, he's not going to be a defensive replacement necessarily because Edman is above average, presumably in center field. And if he's hitting even at a league average clip as expected, they're not going to take him out of the game for a quote unquote slight defensive upgrade. Kiermaier's definitely not going to be a bat that you want off the bench. It's not like he has elite speed where you're taking him as like a pinch running guy late in games. And so with all those factors in mind, I think the thing working against Kiermaier almost has nothing to do with his performance and everything to do with just the roster construction as it is.
Yeah, it's like I said, numbers game. Now, if he can hang on for 2 more weeks, is this a different conversation come September?
Yeah.
Rosters expand to, I think it's 28 guys. So maybe he can stay if this decision doesn't have to be made for the next couple of weeks. That might be pushing the time limit for him. But I think if they can do that, then he might be saved there. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Rojas is the more valuable player. They're also going to they look at Rojas as a clubhouse leader as well. So they're not gonna do him for Kiermaier. They sort of see Jason Hayward the same way. And I know that people right now are liking Kiermaier more than Hayward, but that's how the organization sees Hayward. And it's why they brought him back. So yeah, I think, if this happens within the next 13 days, he's probably done. If it happens after that, he gets a lifesaver.
Yeah. And I think there's a role for him sort of between now and the end of the season. I think what's going to be interesting is whether or not he survives sort of into the postseason, so to speak. And again, to correct something, I said he's not the pinch runner. He has speed, 85th percentile in speed. I just don't think, given like who's he going to be pinch running for, I just don't see them using a roster spot on that, given like whose spot is he going to take on first base or on second base in sort of a big moment. And are you really going to use a roster spot on that? And part of it for me, if I'm being honest, just comes down to like Andy Pages. I think Andy Pages offensively, I would rather have that bat on the bench than I would Kevin Kiermaier's glove on the bench. Because again, I think if Rojas is starting in Edmonton center field, that Kiermaier's on the bench. And if he's on the bench, you've just taken away the single greatest asset that he has, which is his glove, is basically useless as long as it's sitting on the bench.
Yeah, because Edman doesn't need a defensive replacement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this could all change. If Edman stinks when he comes back up and is hitting, basically like Kevin Kiermaier was, then it's a totally different conversation. I'm just speculating from where we are now. So just to recap real quick.
He may make this decision easy too. Like let's not get too carried away yet. Like Kiermaier may make this decision easy in the next 7 days or so.
Totally. So I've got Barnes on the playoff roster. I've got Kike Hernandez on the playoff roster. I think Chris Taylor's going to be on the playoff roster because of the big moments, because of the big hits. And I think Andy Pages is the fourth guy for me. So I've got Kiermaier and Hayward as guys on the outside looking in if all things sort of remain equal and move forward. Who do you have? Do you have Kiermaier and Hayward on the outside looking in that group as well? Or does one of those guys grab Chris Taylor or even Andy Pages' spot?
For the playoffs, you're talking about for the playoffs strictly? Yeah. I think they're both off. Kiermaier possibly before they get there, and Hayward just off of the playoff roster, I think. Because they're not giving the roster spots away for Kike and Chris Taylor. They're just not. And my bold prediction a while back was that Chris Taylor would be starting game 1 of whatever playoff series they're in. It's looking less and less likely now, but that's why it was a bold prediction. He's gone from the DFA leading candidate to he kind of turned it around there and then he got hurt. So I think both of those guys are just about locks. And it comes at the expense of those other two for sure.
I do think Chris Taylor is probably the most flexible of that group. But again, I think you could make a case that Jason Hayward would be higher on the pecking order than Kevin Kiermaier if that spot were to come up. Again, just nothing to do with his performance in this game, but more so just big picture looking at what value they have given the roster construction and given the moments that they might need to be called upon. I think Kiermaier's greatest asset would be as a pinch runner and a pinch bunter. And those are two things that I would not want to use like an extra roster spot on. For me personally.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And like we said, Edman's not a guy where you need a defensive replacement for. Like if they were going to say, okay, Andy Pages, you're hitting well enough, we're going to give you this everyday spot. We don't, Edman's not on the team somewhat for some reason.
Yeah.
Then maybe you keep him around and, he enters the game in the 7th inning, every playoff game and he's your defensive replacement or something like that. But, that's not where we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I understand the people that are looking at Chris Taylor and saying, he stinks. Kevin Kiermaier offensively is the same player as Chris Taylor is. So
and I'm seeing a lot of Kiermaier over Hayward. Like this guy just started hitting.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of recency
coming
bias
into
here.
tonight.
A lot of recency bias here. And I know Hayward hasn't really performed this season, especially not like he did last year. But again, they see him as a leader in the clubhouse. To DFA a guy who has been a leader in that clubhouse for 2 seasons, would not go over for Kiermaier, who I'm sure is liked. He's not I've never heard a bad word about him as a clubhouse guy, but that would not go over well with especially the veterans in that clubhouse. And if you don't think that matters, it does.
Yeah. Kevin Kiermaier on the season, 53 weighted runs created plus. Chris Taylor, as bad as he has been, 60 weighted runs created plus. And I see people in the chat saying the bat is a push, but the glove is the advantage to Kiermaier. Yes, but if we're talking about a guy who's never going to really play the field because of the rest of the roster construction, that's kind of the point that we are making.
And we're also saying Hayward's not on the playoff roster. He's on the team. He's not on the playoff roster.
Yeah, Taylor's the guy I think people are the most irritated with that we have ahead of Kiermaier.
But again, recency bias, right? Because when he got hurt, people were loving Chris Taylor for the most part. Like he had come back into everybody's good graces, and Kevin Kiermaier for like 4 days now has been pretty decent with the bat. And everyone's going, he should be in the playoffs, like with the Dodgers. Like, I mean, that's a lot of recency bias here. Because like I said, the next week he can make this decision easy.
Yep, absolutely. Super chat here from John. Kiermaier has World Series experience, hit a home run against Kershaw in the 2020 World Series. Dodgers lose today. No way Andy Pages makes that catch. Agreed. I saw people saying nobody is defending Andy Pages' defense in center field. I mean, if there's one thing you want to stack hands with every single Dodgers fan in the world about, it's Andy Pages in center field. Like, if you want to just get everybody on the same page, unity for like 30 seconds, let's talk Andy Pages in center field. There's not a single person in the world that's fired up about that idea. That's like, you know what? I'm going to defend Andy Pages in center field. No, nobody wants him there. They want him in the corners. They want him hitting, and that's about it. Kiermaier, like, he wins this game today twice with his bat and once with his glove. So he's absolutely kudos to him for the performance there tonight. So John, we appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, and I see some people saying like, go with the hot hand, and there's 7 more weeks left in the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk some other things. Let's talk Kopech. I mentioned him. Do the Dodgers have their new closer, Anthony? Is this back-to-back days? Daniel Hudson struggles, obviously. So he had been kind of the de facto closer. Phillips comes into this game in the 7th. He hasn't really been used as a closer in a long time. I think just about everybody was ready to acknowledge that Kopech had been the best reliever, at least basically since coming over. He'd been lights out. He's got the velocity. He's got sort of the persona. He's got the intimidation factor. Yeah. He comes into this one 7-6. No doubt about it. 102.6 mile an hour fastball at 1 point, 2 strikeouts, no base runners. What's the argument here, Anthony, against Michael Kopech being the closer?
There's not one, but he is until he's not, though. Like that's the way this bullpen has gone all season. How many guys have gotten save opportunities this season? Phillips, Vesia, Hudson. I don't recall if Trinan has, but Kopech. They're going through this revolving door. Hudson was the guy until the last couple of outings.
Yep.
And so, I think right now he's the hot hand.
Yeah.
And so you do go with him in these situations for the moment. You hope you can find somebody who can establish themselves for the rest of the way there. Maybe that is Kopech.
Yeah.
For me right now, it's how they get to the ninth that's equally as interesting.
Yeah.
Like tonight, and I'll be honest, I haven't looked at like the splits and who was up and who was due up and all of this, but like Phillips before Kelly in that situation was a little interesting to me. I didn't necessarily fully disagree with it. I was just like, okay, that's an interesting thing. And like I said, I didn't look up exactly why that might have been, but
yeah, Phillips got Wynn, Contreras, Pham, and Arenado. So he kind of got it was classic fireman role where you're looking at that guy and basically he got 1 through 4, was due up in that 7th inning.
Yeah, makes sense.
Dave decided to go to him. Now Kopech basically gets the same thing. I think Kopech got 9, 1, and 2. So, both of those guys end up seeing kind of potentially the key batters there. But it seems like Evan Phillips has been the fireman. Throw him in 6th, 7th, 8th, wherever the biggest need is. And then they've kind of had a standardized guy in the 9th. So we'll see if that's a new standardized guy moving forward.
Yeah, which is game 1 of the new guy so far. I sort of like the way they've been deploying Phillips. And it seems like he's bought into the role of like, put me in, coach, wherever you need me kind of mentality. I like it. I think that he's suited for the role. He's sort of been in it before. Like before he became the official closer, he was sort of that kind of guy that you can put in any of those late leverage innings.
Yeah.
And if he's going well doing that, then yeah, and he's all for it. I'm with it too. Like, deploy him where needed and don't give him like such a set role. Now, and I understand like, there were some arms that might have been off limits and stuff like that tonight, but giving Joe Kelly the 8th inning is a little scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the piece. Because again, if Phillips is your fireman, then he's probably going to be coming in some nights in the 7th inning, like we saw tonight, or even the 6th if somebody's in trouble. And so then, to your point, it's Vesia or Daniel Hudson or Treinen when he's back. I mean, I think all those guys are guys that, for the most part, would be better options. Then again, Joe Kelly, when he's on, is on. And
and I think all things being equal, he probably doesn't get the ball in that situation, right? It's Vesia or it's Hudson or it's Gratterall if he's back or it's Treinen, whatever.
Or even Bonda. I mean, I bet they were hoping not to have Bonda sort of have to bail Grove out, which of course Bonda was pretty bad tonight. But I think having Wrobleski go 5 was the plan. I think Grove not being able to get the 6th is what set off a domino effect that then ended up impacting the Joe Kelly decision later on.
Yeah, I agree. That had something to do with it. So, so far so good with Kopech. I just worry about how Dave sometimes leans on the guys that he finds new trust in.
Yeah.
Might not be too long before he's asking Kopech to go get 5 outs in a regular season game.
Tim says, love the way Kopech has been dealing. Lights out. Absolutely, John. Kopey is the new sheriff in town, 103-mile-an-hour fastball. He checks every box, right? He has the stuff. We said it when the trade was made. Don't look at the ERA. This is a guy where you're dumping tools into the Mark Pryor lab and seeing what he can come up with. And it's a guy that had walk issues and no longer apparently has walk issues. All he's doing is mixing guys up and throwing 102-mile-an-hour fastballs and striking people out. And so I just believe, as I'm looking at how this all plays out, that Kopech's going to be the guy. Again, Dave Roberts' mode of operation of late over the last couple of years is one person who's a fireman role and one person. He's actually had a pretty set closer for most of the last few years. And whether it's Treinen in the fireman role, what's that?
He's gotten lucky in that way.
Yeah, like it's one guy in the fireman role and one guy in the closer role. And they tend to do that as much as possible unless a guy's down or matchups or whatever. So I really think there's a decent chance that Kopech becomes a guy that Dave begins to trust. I could see, Daniel Hudson potentially getting a few days off on the IL here coming up if Treinen comes back after the minimum, and then maybe Daniel Hudson takes his place on the old guys catch your breath list for a little while. And maybe Kopech, again, if he gets a few more opportunities and keeps nailing him, we'll see. I mean, look, I joked with a friend. I picked up Kopech in fantasy probably a week and a half ago, because I was like, the way he's pitching and the way everybody else is pitching, if this guy becomes the Dodgers closer, he's going to be valuable. He warms up tonight, and I'm like, here it is. Like, I think this is, you've got the title belt now, Michael Kopech. Yeah. So until somebody comes and takes it from you, I think it's going to be yours.
He's got he's got a little bit of that intimidation factor too.
Oh,
that little sort of uncertainty, like, am I safe getting into the box against this guy? Kind of, sort of.
Not every pitch went where it was supposed to.
Yeah. Which is, there's something to be said about those vibes from a closer.
Yep. I agree with you. I agree. And I mean, he just looks the part. I mean, this is a guy who's 6'3", 220. He's got the beard. He's got the bun. And he throws 103 miles an hour. Like, every part of what I just said is absolutely terrifying.
You want your closer to look like the guy you want on your side in a bar fight.
Totally. I mean, he's like, think about this combination. 99th percentile in average fastball velocity. He throws 99 miles an hour on average. His extension is 87th percentile. So not only is he throwing it harder than everybody else, but it's coming at you closer than just about everybody else. Yeah. And so 99, like 102.6 feels like 106 because of how long this guy's arms are and how far down off the mound he's getting. So good stuff. And by the way, I saw somebody ask, under team control next season. I joked, the Padres sold their farm system for 3 months of Tanner Scott. Andrew Friedman traded like the 19th and 22nd best guys in his system for a year and a half of Michael Kopech. So Andrew Friedman, keep on cooking. Laura with another super chat. How severe is Glasnow's injury? Your best guess. The way it happened today is concerning. If you missed the news, Tyler Glasnow placed on the 15-day injured list with right elbow tendonitis. To Laura's point, the concerning piece of this, Anthony, is how this all played out. Dave Roberts, in a pregame conversation with reporters, said, yeah, we expect Tyler Glasnow to pitch tomorrow. Later in that interview, he was asked follow-up questions about Tyler Glasnow. He acknowledged how vague he was being and said, quote, I don't want to go too far into it. As we're 30 minutes before first pitch, the Dodgers have not released a lineup because they had not made a move to get Justin Wrobleski, who was going to be their starter, onto the roster. 3 minutes before the game, they release a lineup and release the news that Tyler Glasnow was headed to the injured list, and that's whose spot on the roster Wrobleski was taking. So you've been in those situations, Anthony. You've been on the beat. Is this just Dave Roberts, classic being Dave Roberts, saying he's going to pitch today, tomorrow, and then an hour later he goes on the injured list? Or is this a sign that maybe this isn't all that serious and they opted for this as far as like, let's get Tyler Glasnow a breath in order to make some of these roster moves work? Like, how do you read between the lines on how all this played out?
Yeah, this is concerning. I think Laura's right. Like, how it played out is the more telling part than what played out. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter and in the chat tonight saying like elbow tendonitis isn't that serious. First of all, that's not necessarily true. Yeah. But that's taking the Dodgers at their word that that's actually what it is. I mean, yeah. Gratterall's injury was a hip injury first. They told us that. Yeah. Who was it? Joe Kelly or somebody didn't break any ribs. He was fine. It was just a contusion. He had 3 broken ribs or whatever it was. So you take that with the grain of salt. But if this was a rest IL move, a phantom IL kind of move, they have this decided days in advance. They don't wait up until the last minute to figure out what the roster moves are going to be. And he's the guy that goes on the IL. That's not how that works. Yeah. That tells me that they knew there was an issue there. They were hoping today that he was going to get some tests and feel better or whatever it was. And they were waiting. That those answers didn't come until very close to game time. And they did not come back the way the Dodgers were hoping. That's what that tells me. Yeah. Also, he just got a bunch of time off. Also, like I mentioned earlier, none of these pitchers in the rotation are starting on 4 days rest. They're all getting 5 and 6 days rest. Yeah. And with as many guys, I know they have all the injuries and like a bunch of the guys aren't as quality as we want them to be, but like they have options to skip him a little bit also if they wanted to. There's other guys there. And so, again, this is why I said I had so much concern earlier in the show, because for me right now, this is not a situation where it's like, he'll miss 10 days and he'll be back. Like maybe, like hopefully, but I don't see it that way right now. The way this played out, their track record in telling us what's actually wrong with guys, And the fact that, and I know he's like at an innings high, like a career high in innings and starts and all of that stuff. He just got a blow though. He just had the All-Star break and another IL stint. And I think he's probably made like 4 starts since then or whatever. Like he doesn't need another rest. Like if they were going to do that, they would have done that in September, not in August.
Yeah. I think to your point, look, we're all trying to fill a vacuum with something, trying to plug answers into questions that we're not exactly sure which questions we're officially asking. If somebody reads this and reads right elbow tendonitis after what just happened with River Ryan, and given Glasnow's sort of injury history, whether you buy that as, applicable to today or not, I'm not going to tell anybody not to freak out, because if whatever percentage chance this is real is massive. It's overweighted because of the impact that this would have on the Dodgers moving forward. Even if you told me, hey, only a 25% chance he's actually hurt. Yeah, but if 25% cashes, like we're talking about, I'm not going to say a death blow, but darn near close to a team that was already kind of running on fumes when it came to the number of things that had to go right. Now, is there a world where the Dodgers looked at their roster construction and said, all right, we need somebody to start tonight, which means we need either somebody on the IL or somebody optioned or somebody DFA. There aren't a ton of guys to option. And, oh, by the way, they're going to need to figure some more things out over the next couple of days with Bobby Miller, Ryan Brazier, whoever else. Sure. Is there a world where this was just phantom IL to make that work? I suppose. I mean, where I ultimately land, though, Anthony, is if you're calling Bobby Miller up to make a start tomorrow, then you're not really solving any roster spots unless Wrobleski's the guy he's replacing. And if Wrobleski's the guy he's replacing, then Wrobleski can't come back up for, I believe it's 10 days, because you can't just shuttle guys like that. So all of the maneuvering actually tells me this is not nothing, Anthony, and that has me pretty terrified.
No, it's not nothing, because again, a phantom IL stint, they're trying to give a guy rest, something like that. That decision is made after his last start, not 30 minutes before this next game when he's supposed to actually start tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the manager's not telling reporters the day before that, he's going to start Saturday if they know he's going on the IL.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Because
to your point, why would you? You wouldn't.
And I know people want it. I think they're trying to be optimistic here that, look, he just needs rest. It's a phantom IL stint. This isn't that. Again, to go back to my other points, he just had one of those. Dave said that he was starting tomorrow to the best of his knowledge. He went back in the clubhouse after media access, and they told him he's hurt. He's going on the IL.
Yeah.
And
I'm with you, because you wouldn't carry him on the roster for the last 4 days if you knew you were going to IL him. And you wouldn't wait until 3 minutes before the game to IL him either.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. It's a great point. John disagrees with us. I truly believe Glasnow's a phantom injury. Trust. Look, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I do think.
I hope you're right too. I hope John's right.
I do think when I look at some of like the Blake Trinan stuff, I think the Dodgers definitely do this. So I'm not saying the Dodgers would never do this.
The last one for Glasnow was a little bit of this, for sure. They absolutely do it. But that one played out differently. Didn't play out like this. And anytime there is a phantom DL stint, it doesn't play out like this, where you wait up until 30 minutes before game time, the day before the guy's supposed to pitch, to announce it.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point when you look into the details of just how it all played out.
And again, the Dodgers don't get any benefit of the doubt here as an organization, because they at least publicly misdiagnose injuries consistently.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to pitchers.
Yeah, I'm with you. We do have another super chat here from Rod. Are you optimistic that Max Muncy will hit the ground running? Expected back at some point this week. Excuse me, I should say, what is it? The homestand next week, technically. Optimistic about Max and the performance that he might be able to have in the short term for the Dodgers?
Yeah, I am. I think Max has the kind of swing and the kind of swing mechanics that are pretty repeatable for him. I know he's gotten out of whack before and it's taken him some time, but that's why he's getting the rehab stint, and Mookie didn't. So I'm optimistic that he comes in and he's swinging the bat well.
It's funny that I was just going to look up how he performed tonight. He's literally at bat as we speak, currently 0 for 3 tonight. Looking at his performance down in OKC, he had a hit in every single game heading into this one, 1 hit. So he was, 4 for 13 with a double mixed in there, a pair of walks and 4 strikeouts. So it's not like he's lighting the world on fire, but again, I think sometimes how much stock you put into these minor league numbers, I don't know. Not for me.
Yeah,
Look, he's
doesn't bother
replacing
me.
Kike Hernandez. Kike's been hitting better, but it's not like he's competing with a Gavin Lux type hot streak right now as far as like, dang, you better be hitting 300. Otherwise, the guy behind you is going to be better. So I think he's going to have a couple weeks to sort of acclimate. I don't know. I wouldn't expect him to like come out hitting the way Mookie has, but give him a few days.
Sure.
And, I think by next weekend, he'll be settling into a groove and won't be a liability at least.
I think the other nice thing with Max is that because he is a power hitter, that guys still have to pitch to him and be careful.
Yeah.
Like you can't just serve him up, even if he's been struggling for a little bit. Like let's say he goes hitless in his first 3 starts, let's just say.
Yeah.
You still got to pitch. You still got to nibble and be careful with him because you can't lay one in there because with his swing, he'll hit it 430 feet.
Yeah.
And where he's probably going to be situated in that lineup, that's not a guy that you really want to mess with and give a free pass to. So like, I think pitchers might be around the zone, but try to be careful. And so it's not like he's not going to be an easy out, even if he doesn't come, like you said, hitting the way Mookie has started.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, Bobby Miller now expected to start on Saturday. This is a guy who has struggled everywhere. A-ball struggled, AAA struggled, Dodgers struggled. I mean, any reason for optimism? Any reason to believe that he's going to find something in the next 24 hours that is a difference maker?
Not really. I mean, he's got the stuff. We know the stuff is there. So there's always hope for a guy like that. I think maybe we start to look at like, is he good enough that like maybe he's not maybe he doesn't push his way into the starting rotation, come the postseason, but like, is he an option in the bullpen?
Yeah.
I think there's things to look at like that. But as far as like him pushing his way back into like, I'm a top 3 or 4 guy in this rotation.
Yeah.
I'm not super optimistic that he does that with the time that's left.
Here's the issue. You look at his page, 6.65 walks per 9 inning at AAA, 5.6 walks per 9 at the major league level this year. I mean, even at A-ball, he had 2 starts down there and 4.5 walks per 9 inning. This is a guy that last year at the major league level, that was 2.32. So he's like 2.5 times more walks this season than last season per 9 innings. That's the difference. I mean, if you want to just key in on one thing, what's the command look like? If the command is there, he's going to be a serviceable pitcher because the stuff is good enough. The velocity is real. But if he's not in the zone, it's the same thing we were talking about the other night. When guys don't have to respect you in the zone with Walker Buehler, that's fine. We'll just take. Oh, middle, fastball, bang, and that's been Bobby Miller's problem, I think, this year. And so whether or not he can command, I think, is going to be the issue. One last topic here I want to get to rapid fire, Anthony, and we'll get to some questions. Shohei Ohtani, 5 for 44 over the last 10 games. That's not nothing. We're not talking about a 3-game slump. We're not talking about a 10-game slump. That actually goes back. I could give you an ugly number from like the last 2 weeks. He's like, 7 for 70 or something like that. But is there anything you're seeing from Ohtani? Is he pressing too much? Is he too aggressive? Is he in his head? Is there anything you're seeing? Or is this just kind of the way baseball goes sometimes?
Let's also be real here. Like even a 2-week sample of this is like a fairly small sample size. So yeah, he is struggling right now. There's no question about that. He's in a slump. Feels like he's chasing a lot, and then he's getting beat inside, which when he's going well, he doesn't get beat like that.
Yeah.
He's getting beat hard in, and he's chasing off speed away, down and away. They're trying to move out of the zone on him. I think he's probably coming out of his shoes a little too much, a little too often. I think if he kind of can get it back under control and fix the pitch selection a little bit, which Dave has talked about, like it feels like they've been drilling this into his head for a while now. He just hasn't gotten there. Is it a slump? Absolutely. Is it a huge sample size? Not at all. Is it a concern? For me, not really. He'll get back. Everybody goes through this. Nobody runs through a 6-month season and just rips the cover off the ball all the time. Nobody does that. And he's the best hitter in baseball.
Yeah. 10 for 72, by the way, is dating back to July 28th. But again, it's Ohtani. I think he's going to be fine. A couple more super chats. And then if you want to start throwing some questions in the chat, we will get to those. All caps questions. We'll get to as many as we can. John said this: Glasnow career high 134 innings pitched. And with MLB hitting hard on phantom ILs, this is the card the Dodgers had to play. Can't trust Dave Roberts. This goes back, Anthony, honestly, to the Flaherty conversation, because if the Dodgers were up by 12 games, John, I would be in total agreement with you. Heading into tonight, they had a 2-game lead in the division, and the two teams behind them had won 10 of their last 11. So to me, like, if I'm the Dodgers, we're not playing around season anymore. Like, I just don't think the Dodgers could afford to phantom IL somebody like Glasnow unless this was a real injury, given the circumstances, because pitchers have to be gone for 15 days. He hasn't pitched in 3 or 4. So, I mean, I suppose they could retroactively.
They would
They could retroactively do it. But we're still talking about, 12 days in advance. That's 2-3 starts that you're not getting from Glasnow. Who knows where you are in 15 days? I mean, the way the Padres and Diamondbacks were playing, the way the Dodgers were playing, like, you could be 2 or 3 games down in the division by the time he comes back and fighting for a wild card berth. So I just don't think the Dodgers could take a chance on a phantom IL of a guy as important as Glasnow, given that Bobby Miller's the guy coming up to replace him. It's not like River Ryan's waiting in the wings and needs starts. It's Bobby Miller that's taking his place in the rotation.
Yeah, I don't understand the thought. Like, I don't understand how they get from he had essentially what was sort of a phantom IL stint because they built it around they also purposely built it around the All-Star break, till he gets another one, all within about 4 or so weeks, all within about a month. I don't know how that equation works. Like,
let me pause you real quick, because we do have a Dave Roberts quote on this. This from Mike DiGiovanna. Dodgers manager Dave Roberts said MRI test on right elbow showed no structural damage. He expects Glasnow to return after the 15-day IL stint is up. So I'll say, on one hand, he said the exact same thing about Max Muncy coming back at the minimum number of days. Okay. On the other hand, the fact that he's pointing to an actual MRI test with actual results, if we choose to trust him on that, to me, I'm at least encouraged by that they did a scan, they didn't find anything, and we'll see what happens. Like, to me,
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he's lying right now, but like, we were told the same kind of stuff with Max. We were told the same kind of stuff with Gratterall. We were told the same kind of stuff with Trinan.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Like, in all honesty, I didn't expect there to be structural damage. I don't think the Dodgers did either. Like,
yeah,
that's why they waited until when they did it today. Like, they were trying to get that imaging back to see what was going on. Yeah. We'd be having a much different conversation if there was structural damage. I don't think anybody expected that to be the case, but that doesn't mean it's nothing, and it doesn't mean it's a phantom IL stint. Again, I'm struggling to put together the equation that he just had one of these and then he needs another one now. If they were going to do that, they would do it closer to the postseason.
Yeah, and it is possible that there's sort of this middle ground, which is kind of what Dave Roberts is saying. Nick, thank you for the super chat. He was giving us the update here. Sorry, I missed it. He said Glasnow is pushing to start tomorrow. MRI showed no damage. Hopefully back in 15 days. And this is the potential middle ground if Dave Roberts is telling us the truth, where it's not a fake IL stint, but it's also not Tommy John surgery incoming.
Right. Yeah.
So I do think that world exists. Tendonitis, as somebody pointed out, is just stress basically on the tendons. And so, it's kind of this mixed bag. Glasnow said he wanted to start. Dave Roberts said, look, I wouldn't be able to live with myself, essentially. I think he said pins and needles was his language. If he would have been watching Tyler Glasnow pitch, knowing what he knew. And so it is possible that 12 days from now, Glasnow is back and this is, water under the bridge.
Yeah, fully. It's fully possible that happens. I'm just saying it's not a fake injury. They're not putting him on the IL for rest. They're putting him on the IL because he's hurting.
Yeah, absolutely. John with the super chat. Shohei hitting 6 for 70 with 2 strikes. I'll take your word for it. I haven't looked up those numbers. Obviously, the league average with 2 strikes isn't going to be very good, but you would hope for a guy like Shohei, given that, yes, he has prodigious power, but also tends to hit for average, there'd be a little more bat to ball skills. But again, we could nitpick on Shohei Ohtani. He's been awesome. There have been situations and stretches where it has looked bad, but all in all, I think Ohtani deserves far more praise than he does sort of criticism.
Yeah, I think too, like another thing to think about is that he's not necessarily a guy who has had incredibly high batting averages like throughout his career.
Yeah.
Like if the season ended today, I want to say where he's at right now might be a career high. What's he hitting right now? Actually, he might have dropped below that.
Yeah, I think he dropped below.
That. So last year was his career high. He hit 304. For much of this season, he's been above that until this stretch here. But he's not like a guy who typically hits 330, and so like we should be in this super panic right now. Like if he finishes the season at 295, it's the second best batting average season he's ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. Another super chat here from Peyton. My only thought is they heavily use Glasnow throughout the season and want to make sure he's healthy for the postseason. Again, I think Peyton, I don't disagree with you. I don't think they would have done this if there wasn't something that nudged him in this direction. Like, I don't think it was a separate conversation where it's like, hey, we know you feel great, but we're going to do this. I think it was, hey, I've got this thing. I'm a little sore in my elbow. And they're like, hey, we're taking no chances because we're playing for the postseason. So I think we're all kind of landing in this middle ground where it's not the end of the world. Tommy John is not necessarily automatically incoming. And yet there is clearly something happening, because if not for something, I don't think they make this move.
Yeah, like everybody. If he wasn't hurt, they would not have put him on the IL.
Yeah.
If he was healthy, he would be pitching. Like, may it help that he's getting some extra rest? Sure, it might. That's not why they did this. He's hurt. He's hurting right now. If he went out and if he took the ball tomorrow, the Dodgers are in belief that he would not be as effective as he could be because he's not as healthy as he could be. So he's going on the IL.
Yeah. Rod with the super chat. Since the All-Star break, Ohtani hitting 217. So, there you go. I just mentioned that 10 for 72 stat. Go back a little bit longer, and it's 217. So, which I mean, in some ways,
I'm going to go out on a limb though and say that the expected OPS for a 217 batting average, he's probably higher.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's get to a few questions, and then we'll call it a day here. Scott asked, aside from clubhouse leader, what is Jason Hayward's role? Go ahead.
With Mookie back in the outfield, he doesn't have a big role. I mean, it's
pinch hitting against righties, is it? I mean, it's pinch hitting against righties based on a sample size of his career, based on reputation, etc. Again, neither of us is sitting here saying, both of us have Hayward out of the postseason lineup. So neither of us
he's not on my postseason roster.
Hayward. If you were to make a case for Jason Hayward, which is I think what the question is asking, it would be a pinch hitter against righties. That would be it. That would be it. Ederico, name one pitcher and hitter who you think absolutely cannot play bad the rest of the season and into the postseason. So for the Dodgers to be successful, who's one pitcher, Anthony, that has to be lights out for the rest of the however long this season, and one hitter?
Kopech.
Yeah, I was going to say Kopech too.
Kopech's the pitcher.
Yeah, Flaherty would be the other one, because if Glasnow's going on the IL, we're down to one ace, and it's Flaherty, and he's the guy that can throw 110 pitches, presumably, and they might need for 6+ every time he goes out just to give the bullpen a blow. But I think it's Kopech and Flaherty are 1A and 1B in my book. What about a hitter? Who's kind of one guy that needs to be awesome?
This is a little different for the hitters. Like we just saw the stat for Ohtani, right? Like what he's been since the All-Star break, and they have the third best record in baseball in that time. So this is all relative, but if we're going to answer this question, I think I would say Mookie.
Yeah. Take your pick. Ohtani, Mookie, Freddie Freeman, one of those three. I think we're seeing the value of a guy like Gavin Lux, one of the non-big three, having a big sort of performance. Look, I think you could kind of make a case for Miguel Rojas or Kevin Kiermaier, honestly, because if one of those guys proves that they can actually be an offensive asset in addition to being a glove, then that's probably like a 2x value compared to all the rest of these guys. But
it's different. It's different for the hitters than it is the pitchers. Like, Lux could be this guy. Because if Lux goes back to hitting sub 200, this lineup looks very different.
Yep.
Like it's just it's honestly it's any of the guys who you have any sort of expectations for, including a guy like Rojas.
Yep.
Like you could literally name any of them, and if they play badly for the rest of the season and into October, then it's not going to be great.
Yeah, I hear you. Noisy Ninja, they didn't want Rosario because of his defense. Then why would they get rid of Kiermaier? Option Pages, DFA Ahmed, have Edmund go between shortstop and center field since Miggy can't play every day. I think this is totally a fair question. Optioning Pages opens up one spot. DFAing Ahmed opens up two spots. There's one more spot that needs to be opened up, presumably, if and when Chris Taylor comes back. And that third spot, by the way, would have to be a DFA because Pages is the only guy on the Major League roster that can be optioned. And to be fair, I think Pages is going to be optioned because I think that allows them to keep all these guys around for a little bit longer. I think the bigger conversation where I always end up taking it is what happens come postseason time. And, it'll be interesting. Again, my biggest thing, if I could summarize my view on Kevin Kiermaier, is absolute asset defensively. Don't believe at all in the bat. And if that is the profile of a guy who does not have a starting spot, then I don't see the value of keeping him around. Like if I could distill my thoughts on Kiermaier as a Dodger into one sort of simplified sentence, it would be that.
Yeah, unless the way typically like you build a postseason roster, unless the guy he would be replacing in any game is brutal in the field, you don't keep a defense only guy on your bench.
Yeah. Like exactly. Like keeping Rojas around in the event that somebody like Mookie is playing shortstop and you get to the 7th inning and it's 5-2 and you're like, all right, we can shuffle the cards a bit and go put Mookie back in right field and like, let's shore up our defense for the last inning here. But again, I just think, and none of us
even that is iffy if Rojas is hitting like 140 this season.
Right.
That conversation is what the conversation is because he's not.
Yeah. And again, I think the defense has value. It's just a matter of like, there has to be a huge gap defensively between Kiermaier in order to justify it given his bat. And I just don't think that defensive gap exists compared to a guy like Edmund.
You might see over the course of an entire playoff run, like let's say you keep a defense only guy. You might see over the course of an entire playoff run, that guy maybe make 1.5, like the over under might be 2.5 plays for an entire postseason that the other guy couldn't make.
Yeah.
Whereas a guy who you keep as a hitter, he might get 7 to 10 opportunities in high leverage situations to drive in a run or something like that. And that heavily outweighs that 1 or 2 plays he might make in the field.
And shrink it even more if he's a defensive replacement who's coming in for 2 innings and not even playing the full 9.
Right.
3 more super chats and we'll be out of here. John, serious question. Manfred is talking about lowering innings pitched and less than 95 miles an hour thrown to fix all the arm problems in MLB. This is a joke. The report, by the way, is that Manfred was basically going to force guys to throw 6 or more innings unless they have thrown over 100 pitches or unless they've allowed more than 4 or more, I believe is the number, runs. This pretty much got crapped on everywhere on the internet. I think I would put this at a 1% chance of happening. Anthony, did you have any strong reactions to this idea?
Yeah, I cussed at the screen when I saw it. It's stupid. It's stupid. I don't remember what the 95 mile an hour thing was. What was that part of it?
I didn't see that part. All I saw was innings pitched, pitches thrown, earned runs allowed. So apologies if somebody in the chat or if John wants to clarify the 95 miles an hour piece. I do not remember that part.
Yeah, Manfred's terrible.
I'll look it up real quick to see if anything.
The
league is considering. There was a report. I think it was a parody account that suggested it's considering a 95 mile an hour velocity limit. I believe that was a parody. Apologies if somebody else. The account that I saw tweeting about it is definitely a joke. So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, if that were to be real, I don't know how that works.
Yeah. Nick, I know his recovery's been good so far, but what do we think Yamamoto But do we think Yamamoto will be ready for the postseason? We need him. Just nervous with rotator cuff. Through a bullpen. I believe he's got 2 more of those, or sort of a simulated game. He's got two simulated inning. I believe he's got 2 more of those, and then he goes on a rehab assignment. The rehab assignment, I'm guessing, is going to be lengthy. So we're talking about a guy, Anthony, that's probably going to be rejoining the Dodgers with maybe 3 weeks left in the season. So it's presumably built up by the time he comes back, ready to give them 5 innings, 4 innings, something like that, at least to start. But
Yeah,
it definitely feels like it's going to be cutting it close.
if he's healthy, I don't think the rehab stint's that long. It'll just be to build him up to about 85 pitches or so.
Yeah.
I think he'll be if he's healthy. If he's healthy right now and he stays healthy, he'll be ready. I think he'll be ready. And like I said, I don't think it'll be more than maybe a couple of rehab starts. And if they go well and he recovers well, I think that's all they may need.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think the reason why some of these other guys were down there longer was because they weren't bouncing back as well as they wanted them to.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We know Kershaw had a setback. Obviously, Bobby Miller as well. Walker Buehler, I suppose he didn't have a setback.
He was just bad.
He just is what he is. Rod, baseball sure is a hard game to figure out. I agree with you, Rod. It's a lot of moving pieces. Trying to put your finger on any of this is a tough one. So, all right, folks, that's going to do it for us tonight here on Dodger Heads Live. As always, we appreciate you for joining us here on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. Check out DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958 on social media. If you're new around here, please hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join us for that. That is Anthony Witrado. I am Jeff Spiegel. Enjoy the rest of your night, everybody. As always, go Dodgers.